Introduction: Communication as Social Power. Imagine for a moment that you walk into a room full of people. Some are talking to each other, others are looking at you out of the corner of their eye, and in the midst of this inevitable social environment, you decide to speak. But it's not just about uttering words. It's about communicating, conveying an idea, an emotion, a message that impacts, that leaves a mark. The difference between someone who goes unnoticed and someone who conquers a space with their presence and their words isn't a matter of luck, genetics, or natural charisma. It's a matter of communication. The true ability to communicate well isn't just about speaking beautifully or sounding intelligent. It's about connecting, reading the environment, interpreting gestures, tones, emotions, and above all, making others feel understood, inspired, and moved by what you say. Mastering communication skills is, without exaggeration, one of the most powerful superpowers a human being can develop. Think about it. Every door that opens in your life, every job opportunity, every meaningful relationship, every defining moment in which you must convince, lead, or simply share what you think, is mediated by your ability to communicate. From the job interview that defines your career to the intimate conversation that solidifies a relationship, communication is the vehicle that translates what you carry inside into concrete results in the outside world. But here's the key. Most people don't learn to communicate consciously. They do it by imitation, intuition, or trial and error. And that leaves plenty of room for confusion, rejection, lack of clarity, or missed opportunities. The good news is that communication can be learned. It can be trained. Just as you train a muscle or perfect a sports technique, you can develop a presence that speaks for you before you even open your mouth, a voice that inspires confidence, and a mental structure that allows you to organize your ideas with precision and empathy. And when that happens, something changes profoundly in your life. You begin to feel that people truly listen to you, that your words carry weight, that your opinion counts. And beyond that, you realize that you can influence, motivate, and conquer space without having to shout, compete, or prove anything. Because communicating isn't just about talking. Communicating is influencing the mind and heart of another human being. It's about conveying an idea from your inner self to someone else's with clarity, impact, and intention. And when you discover that you can do that, when you understand that you have the power to transform a silence into an affirmation, a doubt into a certainty, or an argument into an agreement, everything changes. The world stops seeming like a cold or uncontrollable place and becomes a board where you, too, can move pieces with emotional and verbal intelligence. In this introduction, I want you to begin to look at communication from a different angle. Not as something you simply use on a daily basis, but as a strategic tool that shapes your reality. Because the truth is that your level of communication defines your level of influence. And your level of influence largely determines your quality of life. People with developed communication skills tend to have more opportunities, better relationships, and greater leadership capacity. Not because they know more, but because they know how to convey what they know, feel, and want. Because in a world saturated with noise, those who know how to communicate clearly become magnetic. In a world full of confusion, those who know how to communicate with empathy become valuable. And in a world where many speak without listening, those who know how to listen and then speak become natural leaders. Mastering communication isn't a superficial goal. It's a profound necessity. It's the bridge between your inner world and the outer world. It's the path that allows you to build, inspire, solve problems, sell, seduce, lead, or simply live better. And no age, profession, or context is immune to this game. Whoever you are, wherever you are, your ability to communicate well is an exponential advantage that accompanies you in everything you do. What's more, it can transform your entire career. You may have the knowledge, the experience, or the passion, but if you don't know how to communicate it, the world won't see it. And conversely, you may not be the most expert, but if you know how to convey value, your influence will grow. Therefore, throughout this audiobook, you will train not only in techniques but also in your mindset. You will understand the logic of effective communication and practice the art of speaking, influencing, and conquering with authenticity. Because it's not about manipulation. It's about connecting from your center with clarity and power. It's about taking responsibility for what you emit with your presence, your voice, your words, and your listening. It's about stopping living reactively and starting to lead your communication in every space you occupy. And while this may sound lofty, communication is practiced in everyday life. In how you greet someone upon entering, in how you look while listening, in how you formulate an objection without confrontation, in how you structure a story that touches the other person, in how, without raising your voice, you make everyone listen. These micro skills, when practiced together, make you a person who is hard to ignore. A person whose word carries weight, whose presence conveys confidence, whose energy sparks interest and respect. So get ready, because what you're about to begin now isn't just training to speak better. It's a journey to discover the power you've always had and perhaps never learned to fully utilize. Your ability to communicate. To say the right thing, at the right time, in the right way. To be clear, empathetic, and persuasive without losing your authenticity. To be a presence that transforms conversations into decisions, relationships into partnerships, and ordinary moments into extraordinary opportunities. That journey begins today. And in the end, if you commit to this process, you won't just communicate better. You'll have a better influence. And when you learn to influence, you also learn to achieve what you set out to do. Without shouting, without forcing, simply by communicating from your best perspective. Chapter 1. The Art of the First Impression. They say you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And while it may sound like a cliché, in this case it's a resounding truth. People form judgments about you in a matter of seconds, before you even say a word. That initial, quick, and intuitive impression has more influence than you might imagine. It decides whether someone considers you trustworthy or not, competent or incompetent, interesting or irrelevant. It's not just about how you look, but what you project with your energy, your posture, your facial expression, and your attitude. In those first moments, your nonverbal communication speaks for you. Your body language, your gaze, the rhythm of your movements, and even your silence build a narrative that the other person instantly interprets. The first impression is less a rational assessment and more an emotional and instinctive reading that defines whether you are worth listening to, respecting, or following. From the moment you walk into a room, the way you walk, the way you hold yourself, your facial expression, your eye contact, your clothing, your tone of voice, and the way you greet others say more about you than any formal introduction. The human brain is programmed to automatically pick up on signals of trust, danger, or authority. This is an evolutionary function we've inherited to quickly identify who we're dealing with. Therefore, if you don't take care of that initial impression, others will fill in the void with assumptions, prejudices, or past experiences. And once a first impression is formed, changing it takes time and effort. That's why knowing how to manage that perception from the very beginning is so valuable. But creating a good first impression isn't about faking or pretending. It's about aligning your external presence with a clear internal intention. When you walk into a room with a purposeful attitude, a confident posture, and a gaze that expresses openness and determination, you are sending a message of presence. And presence is felt. It's the kind of energy that needs no explanation. It's perceived, respected, and remembered. You don't need to be extroverted or have a flashy style. What you need is to be truly present. Without mental distractions, without internal doubts, without the need for external validation. True presence communicates that you are comfortable with yourself, that you know who you are, and that you are ready to interact from your center. One of the most common mistakes when entering a new environment is acting out of fear or anxiety. Your mind fills with thoughts like, what will they think of me? Do I look good? What if I'm not liked? And that disrupts your entire energy. Your body shrinks, your voice weakens, eye contact becomes elusive. And the other person picks up on all of this without you saying anything. On the other hand, when you enter with a clear intention to contribute, to connect, to be present without needing to impress, something changes. People sense your solidity. And that's magnetic. A strong presence isn't aggressive. It doesn't need to dominate the space. It's a calm but firm energy that conveys self-confidence, openness, and balance. And that's something everyone notices. The immediate perception you generate is made up of multiple micro-components occurring simultaneously. Your body posture, are you upright or slouching? Your face, do you smile naturally or are you stiff? Your gestures, do they match your words or are they tense? Your tone of voice, is it warm, firm, or hesitant? And your rhythm, Do you move confidently or anxiously? Each of these elements sends signals that the other person interprets instantly. Therefore, to master the art of making a first impression, you need to become aware of your body, your energy, and your mind. And that awareness begins before entering into any conversation. It begins with your internal preparation. A fundamental trick is to visualize how you want to be perceived before entering a meeting. Ask yourself, do I want to be seen as confident, friendly, professional, inspiring? Then act from that state. Don't wait until you feel confident to appear confident. Act as if you already are, and your body and mind will begin to align with that energy. It's not about pretending, but about activating a part of you that may be dormant. Because we all have versions of ourselves that can be more powerful. And one of them is activated when you choose how you approach, how you look, how you speak, how you breathe. The energy with which you arrive at a place sets the tone for the encounter. If you arrive from fear, you will attract doubt. If you arrive from doubt, you will generate mistrust. But if you arrive with intention, confidence, and authenticity, the environment responds to that. Communication is always two-way. What you emit is reflected. Therefore, take care of your entrance. Do it with awareness. Breathe deeply before entering, connect with yourself, walk with a firm but relaxed step, look at people with respect and warmth, and take the space with kindness and determination. This isn't theater, it's communication training. It's a way to begin every interaction with clarity and impact. And remember something essential. It's not about impressing, but about expressing. People don't connect with perfection, but with authenticity. A genuine first impression, aligned with your truth and purpose, is much more powerful than any forced pose. The key is congruence. If what you project with your body, your voice, and your attitude is aligned with your inner intention, people feel it. They won't be able to explain it, but they will trust you, they will open up to you, they will remember you. That's real influence, making a lasting impression, not through artifice, but through consistency. This is the first step to speaking, influencing, and conquering. Accepting that every time you enter a place or conversation, you are projecting a message, even if you don't say a single word. And if you don't consciously direct that message, others will interpret it for you. So, don't leave your first impression to chance. Master it. Choose what energy you want to convey, what presence you want to convey, what emotion you want to evoke. And do it from the moment you decide to be present. Because communication begins long before you speak. It begins with your attitude. It begins with you. Chapter 2. Magnetic Body Language. They say the body speaks even when you decide to remain silent. And often, that body language carries more weight than your words. You may be saying something with your mouth, but if your posture, gestures, gaze, or energy contradict what you're saying, people will trust what they see more than what they hear. This happens because the human body has evolved to pick up nonverbal cues as its primary form of communication. Before spoken language, our ancestors already communicated through movement, facial expression, body position, and distance from others. Even today, we continue to interpret those signals automatically, even without realizing it. Therefore, if you want to master communication, you need to become an expert in body language. It's not about learning tricks or artificial postures, but about aligning your body with your intention and understanding the silent message you are projecting every time you come into contact with someone. Observe for a moment how someone who inspires confidence moves. It doesn't matter if they're on stage, in a meeting room, or in a casual conversation. Their movements are fluid, their posture is firm but relaxed, their gestures accompany their words naturally, and their gaze is direct but not invasive. It's not that this person has any special training, but rather that their body is in line with their inner state. Their energy is neither scattered nor tense. They are present. This presence translates into magnetic body language, because it doesn't generate confusion, it conveys confidence, and sparks interest. And most importantly, they don't need to overexert themselves. Influence doesn't come from excessive movement or a rigid posture. It comes from authenticity, from inner calm projected with external firmness. The first key component of body language is posture. Your posture is the foundation upon which everything else rests. A person who shrinks, crosses their arms in front of their chest, or ducks their head is projecting insecurity, fear, or a need for protection. On the other hand, a person who stands tall, with relaxed shoulders, an open chest, and their head held high, conveys an image of poise and confidence. There's no need to overdo it. Simply re-inhabit your body with awareness. Walk like someone who knows where they're going. Sit like someone who has something valuable to contribute. Breathe like someone who has a right to be present. These small adjustments create a profound shift in how others perceive you and, even more importantly, how you feel about yourself. The second essential element is gesture. Your hands, your face, your movements accompany what you're saying and can reinforce or contradict your message. An open gesture, congruent with your words, generates clarity. But if you speak enthusiastically with your arms glued to your body or say you're calm while making quick, erratic movements, the other person picks up on that dissonance and something in them disconnects. The gesture has to flow from intention, not anxiety. It's not about moving your hands out of habit or to fill space, but rather about allowing your movements to accompany the real emotion of what you're saying. If you're talking about something you're passionate about, let your hands express that energy. If you're explaining something complex, use gestures that organize the message. If you're connecting emotionally, allow your face to show tenderness, surprise, indignation, or enthusiasm in an authentic way. Because a sincere gesture is worth 1,000 well-formulated words. Then comes the gaze. The way you use your eyes is a powerful tool for communicating security, connection, and authority. Eye contact isn't just about looking at the other person. It's about acknowledging their presence, validating their existence, entering their world. When you look at someone directly, steadily, but not intimidatingly, you are saying without words, "I am here with you. I see you. I am present." On the other hand, when you avert your gaze, look at the floor, blink excessively, or dart from one point to another, you project nervousness, disconnection, or insecurity. But it's not about rigidly fixing your gaze. It's about being present in your gaze. About looking at the other person as if your attention were a gift. Because it is. And that steady, serene gaze has the power to generate immediate trust. In many cultures, eye contact is interpreted as a sign of honesty. So if you want to make an impact, start by really looking. Another vital component of body language is distance. The physical proximity with which you interact with someone says a lot about your level of trust, your respect for the other person's space, and your ability to connect. If you invade personal space without permission, you can create discomfort, even if you don't say anything offensive. If you stay too far back, you can appear distant or disinterested. That's why it's key to read the context, observe the other person's signals, and adjust your distance with respect and sensitivity. In more formal situations, a prudent distance projects professionalism. In intimate contexts, a closer distance can strengthen the connection. But always, absolutely always, body language must be adapted with empathy. There's no fixed formula. It's about the ability to perceive the other person, to tune into their energy, to respond to what the situation requires. When you master these four components, posture, gesture, gaze, and distance, your body becomes a clean, congruent, and powerful channel of communication. You don't need to learn a series of specific poses or movements. What you need is to return to the body with presence, allowing your inner intention to project itself without barriers. And this is achieved, above all, through awareness. By observing yourself as you interact. By perceiving how your body changes when you feel safe or insecure, when you are relaxed or tense, when you are connected or disconnected. The body doesn't lie. And when you learn to listen to it, you also learn to direct it. Magnetic body language isn't about attracting attention. It's about projecting coherence, poise, and confidence without words. And that, paradoxically, often has more impact than a well-crafted speech. Because people don't just hear what you say. They observe what you do, they feel what you convey. And if all of that is aligned, they trust you. And where there is trust, there is influence. Remember this, your body is already speaking. All the time. The question is it saying what you want it to say? If not, it's time to take control. Not from forced control, but from authentic awareness. From today on, every time you speak, walk, listen, or greet, do so with your body present. Because when your body communicates the same thing as your words, no one can ignore you. And that is real power. Chapter 3. impactful voice, tone, rhythm, and pauses. Your voice is one of the most powerful tools you have to influence, connect, and lead. It's not so much what you say that matters, but how you say it. You can have the most precise words in the world, but if your tone is weak, your pace is erratic, or you speak without pausing for reflection, your message loses its power. On the other hand, when you learn to use your voice as a conscious tool, you can convey authority without being imposing, empathy without weakness, and confidence without arrogance. Your voice isn't just a sound. It's an expression of your inner state. And mastering it doesn't require having a perfect voice, but rather an authentic voice, trained and aligned with your intention. Every time you speak, you are conveying emotions, intentions, energy. And all of this travels through tone, volume, speed, rhythm, and the pauses you make or avoid. Tone is perhaps the most determining element. It is the emotional melody of your message. The same message can sound like advice, a threat, or an apology, depending on the tone you use. When your tone is firm but warm, you convey authority and closeness at the same time. When it's flat or subdued, you lose attention. When it's sharp or anxious, you convey tension. Therefore, the first skill you must develop is awareness of the tone you use in different contexts. Record yourself, listen to yourself, and observe yourself. Does your tone reflect what you really want to say? Or is it contaminated by fear, haste, or hesitation? Learning to modulate your pitch is like learning to play a musical instrument. You don't always need to sound the same. In fact, you're most persuasive when your voice has variety, when it adapts to the context and the emotion you want to convey. A good communicator knows when to raise their pitch to inspire, when to soften it to connect, when to lower it to show seriousness, and when to use it with a rhythmic cadence that holds attention. Vocal monotony is the enemy of influence. When you speak with a single tone all the time, people tune out. But when your voice is nuanced, when it dances between intensities, you naturally capture the other person's attention. The human ear is designed to detect emotion, and emotion, in large part, travels in pitch. In addition to tone, the pace of your voice is crucial. Rhythm is the speed at which you speak, the spaces between words, and the way you structure the sound of your speech. If you speak too quickly, you can sound anxious, unclear, or unsure. If you speak too slowly, you can seem unmotivated or bored. The ideal pace is one that allows you to be understood but also conveys intent. There's no perfect speed, but there is a rhythm that's right for every situation. In moments of enthusiasm, you can speed up a bit to convey energy. In moments of tension, you can slow down to convey control. The key is to feel the moment, read the other person, and use your voice as an emotional mirror that accompanies the flow of the conversation. And here lies one of the most powerful secrets of verbal communication: the pause. Many underestimate the power of stopping for a second in the middle of a speech. However, a well-placed pause can generate more impact than a brilliant one-liner. Pauses allow the other person to process what you just said. They create positive tension. They direct attention. And, above all, they demonstrate confidence. Because only those who are truly comfortable with themselves can remain silent without feeling uncomfortable. Insecure people talk non-stop. They fear silence. They fear losing control of the moment. But when you pause, you are saying with your body and your voice, "I am in control. I am present. I am in no hurry." Pauses also allow you to breathe more easily, avoid filler words, and adjust the pace of the conversation to your advantage. Another powerful tool is volume. It's not about shouting to impose or whispering to appear calm. It's about projecting your voice clearly. A firm and steady volume shows confidence. A shaky or very low volume can project insecurity. But also, modulating volume within the same speech can create emphasis. You can raise it slightly to emphasize an idea, and lower it to generate intimacy. This subtle dance of volume gives your message a richer emotional dimension. People don't just remember the words, they remember how you made them feel. And that emotion is in your voice, not in your argument. Additionally, your voice must be connected to your breathing. Many vocal mistakes stem from poor breathing. When you breathe shallowly, your voice sounds weak, cracks, or loses stability. But when you breathe deeply, from the diaphragm, your voice becomes fuller, more resonant, and more powerful. Breathing is the foundation of all vocal training. Therefore, a very useful practice is to do conscious breathing exercises before speaking in public or in important conversations. Inhaling deeply through your nose, holding for a few seconds, and exhaling slowly allows you to calm your nervous system, focus on the present, and project a voice with more natural authority. And don't forget that your voice also communicates internal emotions. If you're nervous, it shows. If you're angry, it shows. If you're relaxed, it shows. So, before you speak, regulate your internal state. Don't enter an important conversation with overflowing emotions. Breathe. Connect with yourself. Remember your intention. The voice doesn't lie. That's why, beyond vocal techniques, what truly enhances your voice is your level of emotional awareness. If you feel good about yourself, your voice reflects it. If you trust your message, your voice projects it. And that authenticity is impossible to imitate. Finally, your voice needs practice. It's not enough to know how to use it. You need to exercise it, like tuning an instrument. Reading aloud, recording yourself, experimenting with different tones, rhythms, pauses, and volumes will give you ease. And that ease is what translates into naturalness. Don't be afraid to sound different. Don't be afraid to pause. Don't be afraid to raise or lower the volume. Your voice isn't meant to sound the same as everyone else's. It's meant to powerfully reflect your essence. And when you decide to train it and use it consciously, your communication is completely transformed. Speaking with an impactful voice isn't just a matter of having a unique timbre. It's a matter of knowing how to modulate your vocal energy so that your message comes across with clarity, emotion, and power. People listen with their ears, but they feel with their hearts. And when your voice connects those 2 points, what you say becomes unforgettable. Influencing through your voice is one of the most powerful and subtle ways to lead. Because you don't need to convince, you just need to resonate. And when your voice resonates with truth, intention, and balance, no one can ignore you, let alone forget you. Chapter 4. Clear and powerful verbal communication. Words are invisible tools with immense power. Every time you speak, you are constructing a reality, shaping an idea, guiding the attention of your listener. But not all words carry the same weight, and not all combinations produce the same effect. There is a big difference between just talking for the sake of talking and communicating with clarity and power. People who master verbal communication not only choose their words well, but also know how to structure their ideas so that they are impossible to ignore. They understand that speaking isn't about filling the space with sounds, but rather conveying a message with intention. Because in the real world, it's not the one who speaks the most who wins, but the one who communicates the best. And that requires strategy, awareness, and practice. The first step to communicating powerfully is mental clarity. If your thoughts are jumbled, your words will be too. That's why, before you speak, you need to be clear about what you want to say, why you're saying it, and what effect you want to generate. That prior intention changes everything. Speaking without purpose leads to noise. Speaking with purpose generates direction. And that direction is perceived. The listener senses when someone knows where they're going with their speech and allows themselves to be guided. On the other hand, when someone speaks without structure, attention is diluted, energy is dispersed, and the message is lost. So before any important conversation, ask yourself, what do I want to achieve with this? What emotion do I want to evoke? What action do I want to inspire? Once you're clear about your intention, the next step is choosing the right words. Words aren't neutral. Each word carries an emotional charge, a mental image, a physiological reaction. Saying, I have a problem, is not the same as saying, I have a challenge. Saying, I'm worried about this, is not the same as saying, I'm analyzing this. The language you use not only influences how others perceive you, but also how you perceive yourself. That's why great communicators develop a powerful vocabulary. They eliminate filler words that weaken their message, replace negative expressions with positive ones, and learn to use precise terms that create impact. It's not about speaking in a convoluted way. It's about speaking with intention, precision, and emotional awareness. Verbal precision is a form of respect for others. When you choose your words well, you are protecting the time, attention, and mind of your listener. You are ensuring that your message is delivered effortlessly, without confusion. And that clarity translates into authority. Because the world listens more attentively to those who express themselves with order and direction. This brings us to another fundamental element, the structure of the message. An idea without structure is like a house without a foundation. It may have good content, but it won't hold up. On the other hand, when you learn to structure your message with logic and emotion, people not only understand what you say, but they also remember and feel it. A basic but powerful structure for communicating any idea is the three-part format. First, the opening, then, the body, and finally, the closing. In the opening, you capture attention with a question, a strong statement, or a short story. In the body, you explain your main idea with arguments, examples, or analogies. And in the closing, you reinforce your message with a powerful statement, a call to action, or a conclusion that connects with emotion. This structure works as well for a 5-minute talk as it does for an hour-long presentation. Because the human brain needs order to understand and emotion to remember. Emotion is the glue of words. A clear message without emotion is forgotten, but a message with authentic emotion sticks. So, when you speak, don't just convey information, convey energy. If you're talking about something important to you, let it show in your voice, your words, your rhythm. Don't be afraid to get emotional when communicating. People connect with emotion more than with data. You can give numbers, arguments, reasons, but what truly moves people to action is how you make them feel. And that can only be achieved when you, too, feel what you say. When you speak from the heart, without losing mental clarity, true influence occurs. Another key aspect of powerful verbal communication is simplicity. Many people believe that speaking in complicated words will make them sound smarter, but the opposite is true. The true master is the one who can explain complexity in a simple way. Because simplicity isn't a lack of language, it's mastery of expression. When you manage to express something profound with simple words, you reach more people, connect more quickly, and create a greater impact. So don't try to sound sophisticated, try to sound real. Use words that everyone understands, but that are loaded with intention and clarity. And within that simplicity lies a secret weapon, metaphors. Metaphors are emotional shortcuts. They connect abstract ideas with concrete images. If you want to explain a difficult idea, find a metaphor that makes it visual, tangible, and memorable. For example, instead of saying, the mind needs organization to function better, you can say, a cluttered mind is like a dark room. You stumble over your own thoughts. That image connects, is felt, and is remembered. Well-used metaphors can turn a common message into an unforgettable one. So train yourself to think visually, to translate your ideas into images, stories, and comparisons. Because that brings your words to life. And finally, one of the greatest secrets to speaking clearly and powerfully. Tailor your message to the recipient. Don't speak as if everyone were you. Speak to the person listening. Use examples that person understands. Adjust your pace, vocabulary, and approach according to the context. What works in a professional setting may not work in an emotional one. What works with a colleague won't necessarily work with a client, a child, or a partner. Great communicators don't repeat speeches. They adjust messages. Because they understand that communicating isn't about imposing, but about connecting. And connection only happens when the other person feels you're speaking their emotional language. Speaking clearly and powerfully isn't a matter of talent. It's a matter of training. It requires awareness, practice, and commitment. It means thinking before you speak, choosing with intention, structuring with logic, emoting with authenticity, and adjusting with empathy. When you do all of this, your words become impossible to ignore. Your message enters not only the mind, but the heart of the listener. And that's real influence. Saying little, saying it well, and achieving much. Because when your words are aligned with your energy, your mental clarity, and your emotional intention, you don't need to speak louder. Your message is felt, understood, and remembered. Chapter 5. Active Listening. The secret that very few master. Listening to influence is not a mechanical task or a superficial skill. It's an art that requires mental, emotional, and attitudinal training. Most people believe that listening is simply remaining silent while the other person speaks, but that's only the lowest threshold of listening. Listening to influence implies a true inner disposition, a total surrender to the present, and an almost meditative capacity to sustain attention on the other person without allowing automatic judgments to contaminate perception. Because in every conversation, beyond the words, a desire, a need, an emotional context is being transmitted that can only be understood if we are truly present. And when you manage to tune into that, you have the power to intervene precisely where the other person needs to be understood, not where you want to be heard. That is the difference between communicating to win and communicating to transform. Authentic influence emerges when the other person feels you're capable of seeing beyond the obvious. Listening in this way is like opening an invisible channel where the other person lowers their defenses without even noticing. This is where the power of silent influence manifests itself. You don't need to impose your ideas, because the other person naturally opens up to your suggestions when they feel validated, heard, and understood first. At this level, listening is a strategic, yet profoundly human act. It positions you as someone trustworthy, someone who not only knows what to say, but also when to remain silent, when to allow the other person to flow. And that, in any setting, personal, professional, family, or social, is an immense advantage. Avoiding misunderstandings begins with learning not to assume. One of the most destructive mistakes in communication is believing we already understand what the other person means. This rush to interpret, to translate what was said into our own frame of reference, is a common ego trap. And what happens then is that we respond to what we think we heard, not to what was actually said. This is where active listening becomes an essential filter. It forces us to slow down the internal process, to ask clarifying questions, to confirm what we understood before reacting. This simple practice eliminates hundreds of unnecessary frictions. Because most conflicts, if you examine them carefully, are not about what was said, but about what was misunderstood. When you learn to listen empathically, you begin to detect emotional patterns in conversations. You can tell when someone is hurt, even if they don't say so directly. You can sense the insecurity behind a criticism, or the fear behind a verbal attack. And if you know how to manage your reaction, you can use that information to positively influence others. Because instead of defending yourself or attacking back, you choose to respond from a place of understanding, and that changes the course of any conversation. You become a calming, commanding, guiding presence. That is the essence of communicative power. Not in what you say, but in how you make the other person feel when you speak, and even more so, when you listen. The deep connection we all seek doesn't occur in perfect speeches or clever one-liners. It happens when someone looks at us and we feel like they're truly seeing us. It happens when we speak and we sense that our words aren't lost in the air, but are being received with sincere attention. In that instant, an invisible bridge of trust, of shared humanity, of mutual presence is built. And that bridge isn't built with techniques, but with intention. Listening to influence means having the will to understand before convincing. It means using silence as a tool, not as a void. It means stopping talking for a moment, so that the other person can hear themselves through you. And that, paradoxically, is a way of leading from behind, of guiding without pushing. In personal relationships, this skill can bridge seemingly broken bonds. In professional relationships, it can make the difference between an authoritarian boss and an inspiring leader. In the social realm, it can elevate your presence from just another person in the conversation to someone whose judgment is sought, respected, and followed. But it's not just about tactics. It's about becoming someone who truly values the other person's inner world. Because true influence isn't built on manipulation, but on understanding. And understanding requires listening, not with your ears, but with your entire being. Every conversation is an opportunity to connect, and every deep connection is an open door to influence. If you develop the patience to sustain uninterrupted attention, if you train your mind not to immediately judge, if you breathe before responding and ask questions that invite openness, then you won't just be listening. You'll be leading without seeming to. You'll be shaping the conversation from within. And when that happens, the other person doesn't just hear you, they feel you. And when they feel you, they trust. And where there is trust, there is openness. And where there is openness, there is transformation. This is how great people communicate. Not through volume, but through attunement. Not through imposition, but through presence. Not through ego, but through the intention to understand. This is something very few master, because it requires humility, patience, and a finely tuned emotional intelligence. But if you decide to develop this ability, your way of communicating will radically change. And the most powerful thing is that the change will not only be external. It will also change your perception, your way of being with others, your relationship with silence, with rhythm, with the moment. Because listening deeply is also listening to yourself in the process. And the more you listen, the more you realize that every person, even the most difficult, has something to say worth understanding. That's where your true power lies. That's where your ability to influence without imposing is born. That's where you begin, without words, to conquer. Chapter 6. Charisma. The skill that opens doors. Charisma is a silent force that transforms the way others perceive you. It's that intangible something that allows a person to effortlessly capture attention, inspire confidence even before speaking, and make others want to stay close. Although many believe charisma is an innate quality, the reality is that it's a skill that can be trained. Like any other communication muscle, charisma is born from the conscious intention to connect with others with an authentic and powerful presence. The first step in developing this skill is to understand that charisma isn't based on attracting attention, but rather on directing it toward an energy that invites, contains, and transforms. It's the ability to make others feel seen, valued, and understood. To achieve this, charismatic individuals master a series of habits that make them a magnetic presence. The essence of charisma lies in a precise combination of confidence and humility. Confidence makes your words carry weight, your body language firm, and your energy convey clarity. But humility is what prevents that confidence from being perceived as arrogance. When someone exudes confidence without needing to impose themselves, it generates respect. But when that confidence is combined with a genuine interest in others, it generates admiration. And that's what charisma achieves, a blend of respect and emotional attraction that opens doors even before you speak. That presence comes from within, from a clear self-image, emotional mastery, and a positive intention when interacting with the world. Body language plays a central role in expressing charisma. You don't need to have particular physical features or a theatrical posture. What matters is the coherence between what you feel, what you think, and what you express with your body. An upright but relaxed posture, sustained but friendly eye contact, a genuine smile, and gestures congruent with what you communicate make others feel comfortable and open. Charisma is built in that invisible space between what you convey and how you make others feel. And here the secret is simple. If you want others to find you interesting, show interest in them first. If you want them to listen to you, listen to them with your soul. If you want them to trust you, be the one who opens your heart first. Tone of voice is another pillar of charisma. Charismatic people don't need to speak loudly, but their voice conveys conviction. They use a balanced rhythm, strategic silences, modulations that evoke emotions, and clear pronunciation. They don't rush their words. They make each sentence meaningful. They speak as if each word carries weight. And that makes the listener feel that what they're hearing deserves their attention. When you speak from inner calm and purpose, others sense that your words have direction. That kind of voice creates an atmosphere of respect and natural attraction. Training your voice, recording yourself, modulating your tones, taking conscious pauses, and using silence as a tool of power is one of the fastest ways to amplify your charismatic presence. But charisma isn't sustained solely by how you look or how you speak. It's fueled by the emotional content of your message. Charismatic people tell stories, use analogies, and connect complex concepts with simple examples. They speak with passion because they believe in what they say. They don't try to impress, but to inspire. They don't compete for attention. They channel it. A conversation with a charismatic person doesn't feel like a sales pitch, but rather a transformative experience. And this is achieved through emotional communication, where words convey not just information but energy. When your words contain authentic emotion, your message transcends the rational and touches the deep. That's what makes people want to listen to you again and again. Furthermore, true charisma isn't about wanting to shine brighter than others, but about making others shine with you. Charismatic people are emotionally generous. They compliment with sincerity, recognize the good in others, validate emotions, and know when to remain silent so someone else can have their moment. They aren't afraid to cede the spotlight because they understand that leadership isn't imposed, it's earned. Charisma is emotional leadership, and that leadership begins with your ability to regulate your own emotions. If you're able to remain calm under pressure, smile amid chaos, and show empathy without losing direction, others will see in you an emotional anchor. And they'll follow your presence, not because you have all the answers, but because you make them feel more capable, more secure, more alive. Training your charisma involves developing an other-oriented mindset. It means asking yourself in every interaction, how can I make this person feel more valued, more understood, more empowered? This service mindset completely transforms the quality of your communication. You no longer seek to convince, but to connect. You no longer compete, but collaborate. You no longer speak to be admired, you speak to transform. And that intention is felt in every word, every gesture, every silence. The world is full of noise, of voices that seek to impose. But charismatic people don't need to shout. Their presence speaks louder than their words. Their authenticity creates a magnetic field that attracts. Their inner energy sustains their outward impact. And most importantly, authentic charisma never seeks to manipulate. It's not a technique to please, it's an expression of congruence. When your values, your words, and your actions are aligned, a powerful presence is generated. Because true charisma isn't born from the desire to be loved, but from the desire to add value. People are naturally attracted to those who know who they are, what they offer, and how they can serve without losing their essence. That's what makes them want to listen to you. Because you don't just talk, you connect. You don't just convey information, you awaken something in them. And when you achieve that, when your voice becomes a mirror that reflects the best in others, you become unforgettable. Charisma isn't exclusive to a select few. It's a human capacity that we can all awaken. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be real. You don't need to be eloquent. You need to be present. Every look, every word, every gesture can become an opportunity to make an impact. When you train your communication with intention, when you cultivate your inner energy, and when you choose to serve with authenticity, you become that presence that others seek, that others listen to, that others follow. Because charisma isn't something you do. It's something you are. And when you understand this, doors don't just open. The world transforms with you. Chapter 7. How to influence without imposing. Influencing without imposing is one of the greatest challenges and, at the same time, one of the most powerful skills a person can develop. True influence is not based on pressure, manipulation, or fear, but on respect, understanding, and emotional connection. Ethical influence means getting others to consider our perspective, idea, or proposal without feeling forced, but rather with a feeling of having made a decision of their own, free and aligned with their interests. To achieve this, we must first understand how the human mind works, how decisions are made, and what truly motivates people to act. All ethical influence begins with empathy. If you don't understand the other person, if you don't know what matters to them, what worries them, what they desire or fear, it will be very difficult to find the way to connect with them genuinely. Empathy isn't just about listening to what they say, but also about reading between the lines, capturing their emotions, their body language, their silences. It's about seeing with the other person's eyes and feeling with their heart. Only when you truly understand someone can you speak their emotional language. And when you achieve that, your message doesn't feel like an order or pressure, but rather a natural invitation to change. Ethical persuasion also requires you to communicate clearly. Often, people reject an idea not because they're not interested, but because they don't fully understand it or because it creates uncertainty. The simpler, more direct, and more human your message, the easier it will be to penetrate. Use examples, metaphors, and real stories that reflect what you're saying. The human brain loves narratives because they allow it to process complex information more easily. If you can show with a story how your proposal helps, solves, or transforms, you'll achieve much more than with a long list of rational arguments. A key principle of ethical influence is the principle of reciprocity. People naturally desire to reciprocate to those who bring value to them. If you give first, if you help, if you contribute, if you solve problems, if you give without expecting, you create a bond of gratitude. And gratitude is one of the most powerful drivers for opening someone's mind and heart. This principle works best when it's not forced. It's not about giving and then demanding, but about contributing sincerely, knowing that that energy will return to you in one way or another. The more valuable your presence is to someone, the more they will want to listen to you, the more they will want to follow you. There's also a very effective psychological technique called the progressive yes. It involves leading the person through a series of small agreements before presenting your main proposal. Start with questions or affirmations you know they'll share with you. This creates a chain of acceptance, which prepares their mind to consider your final idea more openly. It's like preparing the ground before sowing. It's not about manipulating, but about creating a mental state conducive to understanding. Make sure these yes are natural, not forced. They should be self-evident truths that generate an emotional and logical connection. Another powerful technique is reframing. People often reject an idea not because of what it is, but because of how they perceive it. If you can change their frame of mind, their point of view, you can transform the way they view the situation. For example, if someone believes that investing time in learning to speak in public is a waste of time, you can reframe it by showing that it's an investment that will amplify their professional and personal opportunities. Reframing doesn't argue, it doesn't confront. It simply invites you to see things from another perspective. And when someone sees differently, they feel differently. And when they feel differently, they act differently. It's also essential to master nonverbal language well. Much of your influence is conveyed through your tone, your gestures, and your posture. If your words say one thing but your body says another, people will trust what they see more than what they hear. Therefore, when influencing others, make sure your entire being is aligned with your intention. Speak with a firm but warm voice, maintain eye contact without intruding, use your hands to emphasize without exaggerating, breathe calmly, and convey serenity. The more confident and serene you appear, the easier it will be for others to trust you and open up to your ideas. Finally, influencing without imposing means accepting no with respect. Not everyone will be ready. Not every moment will be the right one. And that's okay. True influence isn't immediate. It's a seed. Sometimes a conversation doesn't transform instantly, but it plants a seed that germinates days, weeks, or months later. When you respect the other person's pace, when you don't push, when you leave the door open, that person will remember you as someone they can trust. And when they're ready, they'll come back. That's what builds lasting influence, a reputation for integrity, empathy, and respect. Being influential isn't about having power over others. It's about having the power to awaken the best in them, to inspire, to motivate, to accompany. It's a subtle art that combines strategy with humanity, logic with emotion, and words with presence. And when you master it, you not only communicate better, but you become a positive force that transforms realities without needing to impose anything. Because the most powerful ideas aren't pushed, they're sown. And those who know how to sow with respect reap trust, admiration, and true leadership. Chapter 8. Empathic Communication. Understand and connect. Empathic communication is one of the most powerful yet underutilized tools in everyday life. We've been taught to speak, to express ourselves, to defend our points of view, but we're rarely trained to deeply understand what others feel and need. However, true human connection begins not when we impose our ideas, but when we offer a safe space where the other can feel seen, heard, and validated. Empathy isn't about agreeing with everything the other says, but rather about being present with respect and attention, acknowledging the other's experience without judgment. It's an act of emotional generosity that completely transforms the way we relate to others. People don't always remember what you said, but they never forget how you made them feel. And when you communicate with empathy, you leave a positive mark that opens doors, dissolves tensions, and creates lasting alliances. To develop empathic communication, the first step is learning to read emotions. This involves more than interpreting words. It involves tuning into the tone of voice, body language, micro-expressions, and silences that often speak louder than 1,000 words. Observing gestures, detecting facial tension, and perceiving the other person's energy are all signs that speak to us if we're attentive. You don't need to be an expert in psychology to notice when someone is uncomfortable, hurt, insecure, or emotional. What you do need is to step outside yourself for a moment and stop thinking about how you're going to respond and begin to sense where the other person is speaking from. Validating experiences is another pillar of communicative empathy. It's not about offering quick solutions or minimizing what the other person is feeling. Phrases like, "It's not that big a deal," or "it'll pass" can shut down the conversation and leave the other person feeling misunderstood. Validation means expressing your attitude. What you feel makes sense. I'm here and I'm listening. It's acknowledging without necessarily agreeing. Sometimes, a simple phrase like, "I understand this hurts you," can have more transformative power than any advice. When people feel validated, they open up, lower their defenses, and are more willing to engage in dialogue, cooperation, and trust. Empathy also manifests itself in small, everyday gestures. Eye contact, not interrupting, nodding, putting your phone away while someone is speaking, allowing time for the other person to finish their thoughts. All of this communicates more than any words. Even when we have a different opinion, we can express our point of view respectfully, starting by first validating the other person's. For example, saying, "I can see this is important to you, and from my experience, I see it a little differently," opens the door to mutual understanding, rather than raising a barrier. One of the most fascinating paradoxes of empathic communication is that when you listen first, you gain authority. Listening doesn't weaken you. It positions you as a mature, confident, and emotionally intelligent person. In difficult conversations, arguing to be right almost always generates resistance. But listening with empathy diffuses conflict and gives you a strategic advantage. People let their guard down when they feel understood, and in that moment, your words have more power, because they come from a place of real connection, not confrontation. Furthermore, when you model empathy in your conversations, you invite others to do the same. It's like a contagious energy. The other person feels invited to listen more attentively, to be more human, to open up without fear. In this way, communication becomes a bridge that unites different realities instead of a battlefield where one must win and the other must lose. Empathy turns dialogue into a collaborative dance instead of a war of arguments. Finally, it's important to remember that being empathetic doesn't mean being complacent or failing to express your own needs. On the contrary, empathetic communication allows you to speak more clearly and firmly because you don't speak from a place of reaction, but from a place of understanding. You can say, "This affects me and I want to talk about it," without blaming or attacking, and that has a much greater impact. You can also set boundaries respectfully and without losing connection. That's the true power of empathy. It allows you to be yourself without disconnecting from the other person. Empathic communication is not a technique for manipulation, but a way of living and relating. It is the foundation of authentic relationships, functioning teams, united families, and admired leaders. When you train your ability to read emotions, validate experiences, and listen before speaking, you become someone people want to be with, work with, and grow. Empathy isn't imposed, it's felt. And when you communicate from that place, everything changes. Because in a world full of noise, being the one who truly listens is the truest power. Chapter 9. Master difficult conversations. Difficult conversations aren't an obstacle to avoid, but a powerful opportunity to grow, strengthen bonds, and demonstrate your emotional leadership. What separates people who influence with respect and maturity from those who inadvertently destroy relationships is their ability to navigate those tense moments with intelligence, self-control, and clarity. It's not about always being right or avoiding conflict at all costs. It's about mastering the art of speaking when emotions are running high, when differences seem irreconcilable, and when everything in you is pushing you to react rather than respond. In those moments, every word you say has the power to build or destroy. And if you learn to maintain your center amidst the storm, you become someone who leads not from ego, but from conscience. The key to facing difficult conversations lies in your emotional preparation. Before speaking, you need to consciously pause. Breathe. Don't jump into dialogue just because you're upset, frustrated, or hurt. Ask yourself, what emotion do I want to enter this conversation from? If it's from anger, pride, or resentment, wait. If it's from clarity, the need to heal, or the intention to understand, move forward. This internal pause, however brief, makes all the difference. Because arguing to relieve tension isn't the same as talking to find solutions. Speaking from a place of hurt isn't the same as speaking from a place of responsibility. The more you master your internal world, the more impact your words have on the external world. When you finally enter the conversation, your initial attitude defines everything. Instead of attacking, accuse with humility. Instead of pointing fingers at the other person, speak from your perspective. Use phrases like, I feel this way when this happens, or, from my perspective, this affects me this way. Speaking from your personal experience isn't weakness. It's applied emotional intelligence. It deactivates the other person's defenses and invites them to listen. On the other hand, phrases like, "You always do this," or "You never understand me," trigger the automatic reaction of protecting oneself, justifying oneself, or counterattacking. If you want to be heard, you need to first show that you're willing to listen too. Because difficult conversations aren't monologues, they're spaces for mutual construction. Furthermore, in these dialogues, it's essential to handle objections calmly. When someone expresses disagreement or resistance, don't view it as a threat, but as an invitation to dig deeper. Ask with curiosity, "What part of this seems unfair to you?" Or, "What would make you feel more understood in this situation?" These questions divert the energy from conflict toward understanding. Listening doesn't mean giving in, but it does open up a space of possibility. Sometimes, just feeling heard makes others lower their objections. Other times, you may find points of agreement you hadn't considered. Resolving doesn't always mean winning. Sometimes it means transforming the playing field. Another powerful technique is to separate the problem from the person. Criticize the behavior, not the character. Say things like, "When this happens, it affects me like this," instead of, "You're inconsiderate." This distinction keeps the conversation focused on what can be changed, not on attacking the other person's identity. It also allows the other person to feel more confident in the dialogue. The same applies to you. Don't take everything as a personal attack. Learn to receive feedback without turning it into a threat to your self-esteem. If you defend yourself against everything, you close the door to growth. If you listen maturely, even the harshest criticism can give you clarity and direction. It's also important to read the moment. Not all difficult conversations need to happen immediately. Choose the right time and place. A calm, private, and distraction-free environment increases the chances of a productive conversation. And if the tension gets too high during the discussion, have the courage to take a break. You can say, "I need a few minutes to process this and continue from a better place." That's not evading the conversation. It's having enough emotional control to prevent the conversation from turning into a battle of egos. And don't forget to close difficult conversations with a bridge. Don't leave with open wounds. Thank the other person for being willing to talk, even if you didn't reach a complete agreement. Make it clear that you value the relationship beyond the disagreement. You can say something like, "Even if we don't agree on everything, I appreciate that we can talk about this. I want our relationship to continue to grow." This way of closing the conversation strengthens the bond and lays the foundation for future conversations. Because the important thing isn't just to resolve the current conflict, but to build trust so you can talk about anything in the future. Mastering difficult conversations doesn't make you perfect. It makes you human, conscious, and courageous. It makes you someone who doesn't shy away from conflict, but doesn't fuel it either. Someone who knows when to speak, how to speak, and from where to speak. And that puts you at a higher level of leadership, connection, and maturity. Because in the end, what people will remember most about you isn't whether you won an argument, but how you made them feel as you faced the truth together. Chapter 10. How to adapt to different communication styles. Adapting to different communication styles is one of the most powerful skills you can develop if you truly want to connect, influence, and impact all types of people. Not everyone thinks like you, not everyone processes information the same way, and much less reacts the same way to your words. Therefore, if you insist on communicating with a single, rigid style, you severely limit your ability to persuade, inspire, or collaborate. On the other hand, when you are conscious enough to observe, identify, and adjust your communication style according to the other person's profile, you enter a higher level of social intelligence. You become a flexible, strategic, and deeply effective communicator. The first step to achieving this is developing your sensitivity to identify styles. Some people are very rational, who need facts, logic, structure, and precision to feel comfortable. In their eyes, an emotional or overly casual approach may seem empathetic, but in their eyes, it will be unprofessional or even manipulative. These people value facts, figures, and clarity. With them, your message must be concrete, well-organized, and supported. On the other hand, there are highly emotional people, who connect more with feelings, tone, facial expressions, and personal stories. With them, overly technical or cold communication will be perceived as distant or even insensitive. Here, you need warmth, humanity, and connection. There are also more visual types who need to see what you're saying to understand it. They use words like imagine, I see, observe this. With these people, visual metaphors, graphic examples, and detailed descriptions are very powerful. Auditory types, on the other hand, respond better to phrases like, listen to this sounds logical, I'll explain it to you. They prefer rhythm, tone, and musicality in language. Finally, kinesthetic types connect through physical or emotional sensations. This feels right, that decision makes me uncomfortable, I need to digest this. With them, you need empathy, pauses, and communication that touches the emotional or sensory level. On a personality level, we also find people who are very control-oriented, who value efficiency, leadership, and quick results. If they perceive hesitation, weakness, or distraction in your speech, they tune out. With them, get to the point, show confidence, and make clear how your proposal contributes to the common goal. In contrast, there are more relational people who prioritize the well-being of the group, harmony, and mutual respect. If you are too direct with them, they may feel invaded or inconsiderate. Here, you need to listen more, validate their emotions, and build an environment of trust before moving forward. Introverts tend to think before they speak, process internally, and are uncomfortable with the pressure to respond quickly. They appreciate quiet time, clear messages, and deeper but slower conversations. Don't interrupt them or force them to express themselves immediately. Give them space, and they'll surprise you with their clarity and depth. Extroverts, on the other hand, think while they speak, are energized by interaction, and prefer a more dynamic pace. Here, you can be more expressive, use vivid examples, and maintain an active flow in the conversation. But be careful. Don't confuse extroversion with superficiality. Often, behind that energy lies a deep need for validation or genuine connection. Another key point is to observe how people make decisions. Some need a lot of information, time to evaluate, and certainty before committing. Others decide quickly, guided by intuition, impulse, or inner conviction. If you pressure the former, you lose them. If you're too slow with the latter, you bore them. The wise thing to do is calibrate, adapt your pace to the other person's. If you notice they hesitate a lot, offer clarity. If you see they decide instantly, respect their speed, but make sure they understand everything they need to know. The big mistake many communicators make is judging others for not being like them. They say things like, he's too slow, he doesn't understand me, he's too emotional, he doesn't know how to listen, when in reality, what's happening is a lack of adaptation and sensitivity. You can't expect everyone to change for you. True leaders adapt, not to lose their essence, but to expand their influence. Communicating effectively isn't about imposing your style, but rather translating your message into the other person's language. And this doesn't mean you should act or pretend. It's about developing your communicative repertoire, your range. Just as a musician masters different styles to connect with different audiences, you can learn to change your tone, pace, approach, or language to better reach others. This is the difference between someone who simply talks and someone who truly influences. Effective communication isn't uniform. It's strategic. And those who master it gain respect, trust, and results where others only receive misunderstandings. Understand that this skill requires conscious practice. It's not enough to know the theory. You must observe, experiment, adjust, and learn. Every conversation is an opportunity to calibrate your style. Every person you meet is an invitation to expand your adaptability. And the broader your communicative range, the more doors will open for you. Because in a world of complex relationships, the one who can speak everyone's language, without losing their essence, is the one who leads, transforms, and conquers. Chapter 11. Nonverbal Language. The Power of What You Don't Say. In every human interaction, nonverbal language acts like an undercurrent that guides and shapes others' perceptions of us. Before a word leaves your mouth, your posture, gestures, gaze, and facial expression have already communicated a powerful message. In fact, numerous studies in social psychology conclude that more than 70% of a message's impact comes from nonverbal elements. This chapter is dedicated to understanding how to use that power consciously and effectively, transforming each gesture into a tool of connection, influence, and authenticity. The first thing we must understand is that the body doesn't lie. While words can embellish or camouflage intentions, body language reflects what we feel deep down. Therefore, to master nonverbal language, you must first develop a keen awareness of your inner state. If you're nervous, if you don't trust what you're saying, if you feel uncomfortable or disinterested, all of this manifests itself through micro-expressions, defensive postures, or evasive gestures. Congruence between what you say and how you say it is essential for building trust. If your voice conveys confidence, but your body appears closed or tense, the message will be confusing, and the other person will unconsciously perceive this. Therefore, training your body to harmoniously accompany your words is a skill that requires practice, observation, and conscious adjustment. An upright posture, with relaxed shoulders and a slightly forward chin, projects authority and openness. A sustained gaze, without being invasive, conveys presence, honesty, and mindfulness. The intentional use of your hands, to underline ideas or emphasize them, lends rhythm and vitality to your message. On the other hand, crossing your arms, constantly looking at the floor, or adopting a hunched posture sends signals of distrust, insecurity, or rejection, even if your words are kind. But beyond what you communicate, developing your ability to read others' nonverbal language is an invaluable advantage. Observing how someone moves their feet, how their tone of voice changes, how they lean away or lean toward you while you speak, allows you to detect whether they are comfortable, interested, bored, or defensive. These signals give you a compass to adjust your message, your pace, or even your intention. Empathy is born from that silent reading you do of others without them having to say a single word. Furthermore, nonverbal language is key in high-tension situations, negotiations, or conflicts, where repressed emotions manifest more clearly through the body than through words. Being able to perceive these nuances gives you a tactical advantage, but it also makes you a more sensitive and compassionate person. Influence that isn't imposed is born from respect for what others are feeling, even if they don't say it. And in that sense, mastering nonverbal communication isn't just a strategy, it's a form of humanity. It's also important to consider the cultural context. Some gestures can have opposite meanings in different cultures. For example, eye contact may be a sign of respect in the West, but it can be interpreted as a challenge in certain Asian countries. The same goes for physical distance or the way you greet. Therefore, if you want to influence globally, your nonverbal language must be calibrated with intercultural sensitivity. Mastery of the body also includes managing space, silence, and rhythm. Knowing when to pause before responding, when to lean forward to generate closeness, or when to remain silent with a serene expression can be far more persuasive than 1,000 words. Silence, when mastered, becomes a tool of authority and presence. And presence is the art of truly being in the moment, not just with words, but with every cell of your body. The good news is that all these skills can be trained. Record your conversations, observe your gestures, practice in front of a mirror, ask for honest feedback. Become a student of nonverbal language. Observe great communicators, leaders, actors, orators. How do they use their bodies? How do they convey emotion with a simple pause or a genuine smile? Learn from them, but don't imitate them. Your nonverbal language must be authentic, congruent with your personality. Empty imitation breeds rejection. Authenticity, even if imperfect, generates connection. Because what you don't say, screams. And if you know what you're screaming with your body, then you speak with a fuller, more powerful, and more human voice. Thus, nonverbal language ceases to be a mystery and becomes your silent ally, the one that accompanies each word with intention, presence, and truth. Chapter 12. Close with Impact. The art of making a difference with your words. Every great conversation, presentation, or speech needs an ending that not only concludes, but transforms. Just as a musician carefully curates the last note of a symphony, or a director the final shot of a film, you too must learn to close your communications in a powerful, memorable, and effective way. Because in communication, we often don't remember exactly what was said along the way, but we do remember how it was felt at the end. And if you know how to leave a mark with your final words, you'll have the ability to inspire, move to action, and remain in the minds and hearts of others. To achieve an impactful closing, the first thing is to be clear about your main message. What do you want the other person to remember? What is the idea that should remain beyond your words? Every closing should be an emotional and intellectual synthesis of what was shared, but also a call to something more: reflection, change, concrete action. It's not just about saying, "Thank you for listening," or ending with, "That was all," but about closing the circle with purpose. A good closing is like a great painter's signature, a personal mark that encapsulates your essence and demonstrates that everything you said had direction, intention, and coherence. There are different ways to close with impact, and each can be adapted to different contexts. You can close with a powerful, short, but moving story that summarizes the central message. Stories have the ability to connect on a deep level, and a well-told final anecdote can give meaning to everything you've said. You can also close with a memorable phrase, a quote that reinforces your ideas, or a meaningful personal statement. Phrases that contain truth, power, and emotion resonate in the listener's mind like a transformative echo. Another effective strategy is the call to action. Whether you're giving a presentation, leading a team, or persuading an audience, close with a clear and direct invitation. What should they do, think, or feel after listening to you? Don't assume the impact will come on its own. Direct the energy you've generated toward a specific goal. You can even close with a provocative question, one that forces them to reflect, that shakes them out of passivity and invites them to question themselves. Because a good question, well formulated, can be more powerful than a statement. Beyond the strategy you choose, the true impact of your closing lies in the energy with which you convey it. Your voice, your pause, your gaze, the pace with which you conclude, all of this communicates much more than the words themselves. End firmly, yet with humanity. Clearly, yet with emotion. Determinately, yet with humility. That's what makes the difference between someone who simply spoke and someone who left a mark. And if you want your messages to endure, you must learn to cherish those final seconds as if they were gold, because they are. Those moments determine whether your message was just noise or truly became influential. Remember also that closing isn't about abruptly ending. It's about transitioning gracefully. It's about knowing when to say, "Enough," without losing connection or energy. It's about leaving the other person with a sense of completion, but also with an inner spark that takes them further. In a personal conversation, closing with presence and gratitude can build a stronger bond. In a negotiation, closing with a vision for the future can open new doors. In a public talk, closing with an inspiring vision can mobilize the masses. In all cases, the end isn't goodbye. It's an opportunity. A chance to leave a mark, to sow an idea, to raise the level of consciousness of your listener. So don't waste that last word. Don't improvise it. Make it count. Close with intention. Close with impact. Because great words can open doors, but great closings open minds and awaken hearts. And when you learn to close like a master communicator, then you don't just talk. You conquer. You capture the moment, the attention, and the soul of your listener. And that, beyond any technique, is the true art of speaking, influencing, and conquering. Conclusion. Speak, influence, and conquer your world. Speaking, influencing, and conquering isn't a gift reserved for a select few. It's a skill we can all develop with intention, practice, and awareness. Throughout this audiobook, we've explored the fundamentals, principles, techniques, and secrets that turn communication into a tool of authentic power. And if anything should remain deeply etched in your mind when you reach this conclusion, it's that the way you communicate transforms the way you experience the world. Every word you choose, every silence you respect, every emotion you project, every idea you champion, everything communicates who you are, what you stand for, and where you're headed. When you speak clearly, with empathy, and with purpose, your world changes. Your relationships elevate. Your opportunities multiply. Your influence expands. There is a before and after in the life of those who decide to communicate consciously. Before, we often spoke for the sake of speaking, without considering the impact, the tone, the moment. We reacted instead of responding. We filled spaces with empty words. And then, when we understand the true power of well-directed communication, we begin to create with our words. We begin to build bridges, heal wounds, inspire movements, sell ideas, products, or visions. You begin to observe how your environment changes when you change the way you express what you feel and what you think. You discover that your voice carries weight, that your presence transmits, that your energy can be channeled to lead, influence, and connect. And not from manipulation, but from authenticity. Being a master communicator doesn't mean talking a lot or speaking loudly. It means knowing when to speak, how to speak, and why. It means listening attentively, reading between the lines, capturing hidden emotions, and adapting your message to the other person's heart. It means being aware that every word you say can lift or tear down, motivate or discourage, draw closer or distance. It means having the responsibility to use your language as a tool for positive transformation. Because when you elevate the quality of your communication, you also elevate the quality of your life. Nothing is left out. Your personal, professional, emotional, and spiritual life improves. Your results expand because your voice is now aligned with your vision. And when you speak from that coherence, the world responds. This path you close today with your ears and your mind is just beginning with your daily decisions. Because what will truly make the difference won't be what you've learned here, but what you practice from now on. Every conversation is an opportunity to train yourself. Every interaction is a test to fine-tune your presence, your listening, your persuasion, your ability to inspire. Don't strive to be perfect, strive to be mindful. Correct your mistakes with humility. Celebrate your progress with enthusiasm. And, above all, remain committed to continuing to grow. Because the more you grow, the more impact your communication has on others. And the more impact you generate, the closer you are to achieving the life you desire. Speaking, influencing, and conquering isn't a one-time goal. It's an ongoing practice, a lifestyle. It's a way of being in the world, of contributing with who you are, of leaving your mark. It doesn't matter if you're shy or extroverted, if you're just starting out or already leading teams, if you communicate in front of a camera or in front of just one person. The important thing is that you understand that your voice matters, that your message has power, that your words can be the beginning of real change. This audiobook has been a guide, a compass, a boost. Now it's your turn to take control of the helm and navigate with intention. Speak from your truth. Influence with integrity. Conquer with empathy. And remember that the most powerful transformation begins when you decide to communicate differently. Never underestimate the power of a well-spoken word. Because when you learn to communicate from the soul, you can move worlds. You can change your destiny. You can inspire others to find their own voice. That is the true purpose of communication, to connect, uplift, transform. So speak, influence, and conquer. But do so with your heart as your guide and your conscience as your force. And then, you will not only change the way you communicate, you will change your life, and possibly the lives of those who listen to you as well. So, if this audiobook inspired you and you're ready to continue delving deeper into your personal growth and inner transformation, I invite you to discover another eye-opening audiobook that will change the way you see the world, your decisions, and your potential. Click here, and I'll see you there.